Today we're going to talk about the objection. I've used print before and it just didn't work. I mean, we don't hear this one often. We hear it occasionally. It's funny. I've got a kind of a funny story about this because there is a chiropractor here in my area that literally owns chiropractic offices at about 10 different locations where we have magazines. And he is adamant about not advertising in print. And it's funny because I had a chance one time at a chamber event to have a conversation with him, just kind of sitting around at a lunch table. And I just asked him, why are you so adamant about that? And he said, well, 20 years ago, when I was first starting my first office, I ran a campaign with the newspaper and it did nothing for me. And I just responded, I was like, well, I fully understand. 20 years ago, I went to a dentist and had a bad experience, and I'm never going to go to a chiropractor. And I mean, that's kind of what people do. I had a bad experience with one of your competitors, so I don't want to use you. So when you get that objection, one of the first things you need to do is hold a mirror up to them. I mean, just hold a mirror up, not literally, of course, but, help them realize how silly that objection really is. And so the first thing you can say is, hey, let me just ask you real quickly, what would you say if I judged your business based on an experience I had with so-and-so? Would that make sense at all? But I would ask that you show me that same level of respect. What we do is entirely different than anything you've ever tried before. And the fact that something else may or may not have worked for you should be absolutely irrelevant, whether you choose us or not. You should hear what we have to say. I expect that level of respect. I mean, own that. Once again, you are a business person. Now, you don't want to be a smart aleck about it, but you do want to make sure they understand. Sometimes people say things without really thinking them through. And anybody that would ever judge a business based on an experience with a competitor, that's just silly. And so don't be afraid to kind of point that out. Now, like I said, you don't do it in a smart ass way. You just simply ask them, hey, I would never judge your business based on an experience that I had with one of your competitors. And it would actually be silly if I thought about doing that. I ask that you show me the same level of respect. And a lot of times people will just say, oh yeah, that's probably makes sense. So because that's the first thing. The other thing to know is their other campaign in print did work for them. But much like our magazines, they expect their customers to say, I saw your ad in blank. And that is just not how people act. It's just not how people act. And, on that note, if you ever have somebody say that I ran in this print and I didn't have one single person walk in and say they saw my ad, which is often they'll take that a step further. I just like to say, how old are you? I'm 50. In your 50 years, how many times have you ever walked into a business and said, I saw your ad in a certain place? And I'm yet to have one tell me that they've ever done that. And so they'll say, well, I don't do that. And I was like, well, then why do you expect your customers to? Why do you expect your customers to? And it's just a case where once again, they don't really compare it to their own experiences and they don't really think it through. Now, with this chiropractor, I'll go back to that. One of the things that I did write an article about this for our magazines, about how I ended up going to this chiropractor because his office is right across the street from me. And when I walked in, I had to fill out a form. And at the bottom of the form, the first page of the form, it said, how did you hear about us? And it had a checkbox for yellow pages, a checkbox for internet, and a blank for other. Now, if you've got 8 pages of medical records to fill out, are you going to check a box or are you going to write something in? You're just going to check the box and move on. And so that's why he's convinced that print doesn't work, because everybody checks the internet. And now on that front, he's been in business for 25 years. Everyone has already heard of him anyway. So asking the question, how did you hear about me, is much like asking the question, how did you hear about Pepsi? How did you hear about Toyota? Nobody knows the answer to that. And so all of that comes back to the reasons that that person might have been convinced that print didn't work for them the first time. And so just be ready to handle that and work them through all those different scenarios to help them understand that they can't judge their experience in the past with what we do. I mean, one of the things that also is a great line to use, remember, anytime you're handling objections, if you can say something that they don't expect you to say, then you're going to gain a little bit of additional conversation time. So one of the great things to say in that situation is just simply, hey, it doesn't surprise me, most print sucks. I mean, they don't expect you to say that. And then you just simply say, but I tell you, that's why we did what we did, because we knew there was an opening, because traditional print doesn't work. Let me show you what we do that is going to be different than what's been done in the past. I mean, and all of those things are just avenues to extend your conversation and get to your presentation and show them what we do that is different than what they've done with other print in the past.